Hey everyone, it's the Canadian Libertarian, and today I'm going to be having a discussion with John Irwin, a fellow Canadian that too wants to stand up in defense of our liberties that we're seeing slowly, or actually at this point, increasingly being taken away by these established political parties that seem to have gone into more of an authoritarian mindset than having that freedom-oriented mindset that once used to be predominant for the political classes in this country. Freedom used to be something that used to be celebrated and promoted. Now it seems to be something that most political parties are trying to suppress. John is concerned, like most Canadians are in this day, and we are going to start this conversation out right now talking about taking people's gun rights away, because that is actually an issue I think that's of paramount importance to discuss, because as anyone out there should understand, when you're confronted with any situation, whether it's from your government or any other potential threat or danger, if you're unarmed or have no ability or capacity to defend yourself, well, then your rights have already been taken from you. So any pretense, and especially in Canada, the problem I've always had is we already have a lot of regulations and restrictions for gun owners in this country. I mean, you're given criminal background checks every day just to make sure you haven't done anything nefarious. So that's already, that's pretty much up there as far as having a regime that's got a big eye and the big thumb on those of us who actually possess or own guns. But they're looking to now even go further under the Trudeau Liberals, and especially under John Tory and some of these politicians in some of the big urban centers. Well, they want to use the pretense of fear because of gang members or people that are, using these guns, most of them illegal, I might add, to, cause mayhem or use as violence towards, peaceful people. But I mean, think about it. If you disarm the population, you've actually made those peaceful people even more victim and at even more perils and dangers by these gang members or the people that don't really care about laws. Because that's the other thing that I need to stress this. Very important people understand. Criminals don't care about laws. They never have. You can write as many laws on the book as you want. A criminal don't care. A criminal is going to be a criminal. So all you're doing, if you're trying to take away the rights of gun owners or create more regulations or restrictions, are actually hampering and hindering the very people that need those gun rights so that they can stand in defense of themselves, the people they care about, their community, and ultimately their country. Go ahead, John. What do you got to say?
Well, you absolutely nailed it on the head there, Mr. Libertarian. I spent 20 years serving my country. I did the whole hoo-ah Army thing. Now I'm retired. I'm working civvy side. And because of my retirement, well, you see a lot of things more for what they are than what you're told they are to be. The Danforth shooting, for an example, the proof is in the pudding right there. You watch the video. The gentleman knew exactly what he was doing with his stance and with his loading capabilities. So he already had a plan of what he was going to do. Myself, I'm a responsible gun owner. I own some rifles, I own some pistols, and every one of those items has a surmount amount of paperwork that goes with it. So I followed the law, did what I was told, okay, paid my registration fees, took the training, even though I already had 20 years of military experience. But because the way the law is set up, you still have to qualify, right? Make sure that you're good upstairs, and then prove that you're a responsible citizen and you can own said firearms. But when you hear, as you said, John Tory and Bill Blair and all these so-called experts when it comes to personal safety and people's protection, when I listen to them, it's like talking to a child. They make these facts up. They either put them out of their butt or they're being told what to say. They don't really have any concrete proof and any kind of justice to back up these claims when it comes to gun ownership in this country. I'm a responsible gun owner. My wife is a responsible gun owner. I have family members who are responsible gun owners. So firstly, we're not thugs. We're not criminals. We're not idiots. And when you're constantly being told what you can have and what you can't have by said authority, it makes you think twice about trusting it, right? I'm not anti-government. I'm anti-BS, right? I serve my country proudly. I'll fight for this country because I did fight for this country, and I'll keep fighting. But don't tell me how to live my life, and don't tell me what I can buy, and don't treat me like a thug because of it.
Right on. Well, you know, actually, as someone, this is something before I even started understanding politics or ideologies or even the philosophy of liberty or all these things that really most of us as we grow up as adults, very few of us actually learn these things. Now in the information age, it's much easier to do so because mostly we're inundated with the things that we're taught, whether it's through our education system or through the churches. Like I had, you know, kind of two forms of knowledge I learned, which was through the public education system. And I come from a religious family, so I had religious ideology and teachings taught to me as well. But the number one thing that I understood and the big difference that I seen, which has actually culminated to this point where I am now at almost 48 years old, is the huge difference is, put it this way, all humans have to have some authority. There has to be an authority because rules have to be in place. Now, we can either gain that authority by other fallible human beings, and whether you're just, you know, whether you're an atheist or a religious person, you have to recognize and acknowledge that all human beings are fallible. There's no such thing as a perfect human being. Whereas religion, now it was taught to me in a much different manner, but religion, what I understand now, because I've thought about this, I've heard other people discuss it, and people like Jordan Peterson, Stephen Molyneux, and others who have talked about this from philosophical or psychological levels, is basically the concept of authority. It has to be, like I say, in existence. Otherwise, we're in the state of nature, and then it's just, you know, the strong survive, and then, well, it's just a free-for-all. So no, to have any kind of organized society where you have people that treat each other reasonable, where we're peaceful, you have to have some semblance of authority. The beautiful thing about the religious teaching, what I understand today as an adult, is that authority is abstract. It's outside of our actual tangible realm. So there's no one that you can't lay your hands on God and say, oh, he's on my side because I'm a conservative, or he's on my side because I'm a liberal. No, it's ground rules and principles that can't be manipulated because it's set in stone, basically the 10 Commandments, right? Whereas politicians and politics and government, why I am so opposed to government, although I understand that people, which is why I say evolution, not revolution, the human mind, we just have to learn to break free from these concepts. Now, government would have been a great alternative to the mysticism of the old, because people then used the power of God or the church and its relationship with the state to impose their iterations of their God, their deity on the people. Whereas if you just read the scriptures of the Bible and think about them objectively, it's individual free will. You know, Jesus, we could have all, you know, been sacrificed at the altar of the greater good, but Jesus chose to take the sacrifice upon himself so that we had free will, and that free will is what matters most. So just like you, when you have politicians, I get really disturbed when I hear people that are supposed to be adults, because that's the thing, we're all adults here, we're not children. And when you hear adults trying to disarm people that have not caused any harm to anyone, that, I mean, you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist. I don't care if you're for guns or against guns. That should at least cause you concern. Why would anyone want to disarm people that have gone through the process such as you, which is very cumbersome, very burdensome, and basically have gone through your entire history with a fine-tooth comb, and yet they still want to impose more mandates, restrictions, and regulations on a person that hasn't caused any crime. And that, once again, actually, I kind of went off on a bit of a tangent there, but that was the number one thing that growing up, whether it was in school or any other area in regards to government, is collective or preemptive punishment. That is the number one thing that I take issue with, is you're punishing very good, like good people like yourself, for the acts of whether it's one or a minority of group. No, that's the whole point of individualism. That's the whole point of why all these philosophical geniuses going all the way back to Aristotle to today. And even people like Nietzsche that acknowledge, yeah, it was probably a stupid idea for us to kill off the concept of God by using our objective standards, which like I say, we're advancing humans, we're going through these conversations, and we're going to have a lot of battles, even with people that we agree with, because like I said, we've been taught some very controversial and contradicting things constantly. But because we live in information,
big time.
Yeah, but because we live in the information age, we all have the opportunity. So there's no excuses anymore. Like I said, back in the day when I was a kid, Encyclopedias might have cost your parents a couple $1,000s, so you didn't have access to that information if you were poor. Today, no one has that excuse. So like I said, the most important thing is to get away and start pushing back. I don't care where you come, like I say, where you reside on the political spectrum, is pushing back against this preemptive collective punishment mandate where you take good people and punish them for the acts of bad people. I myself have had to deal with that because of having a few beers on my ATV. I won't drag this out in this video because I've covered it before. But yes, other people have caused harm to people, you know, by being too inebriated or intoxicated. And yeah, I have to be punished. I've never caused harm to nobody. I would never do it driving my personal vehicle or anything. But when I'm out in the trails in the middle of the woods, I like to have a couple beer. I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think it makes. But I've been criminalized. I had my whole career taken away from me as a result of that. And I've heard gun owners, once again, I grew up in New Brunswick in rural communities. I've heard of gun owners that have been punished, or even people that have had restrictions put against them for even ever owning a gun. And it's not because they've done anything, you know, with a gun to cause violence or harm to another person. Once again, it's collective and preemptive punishment, and I've seen too many times that it's no respect for the minority or the individual. It's all about collectivism, and collectivism, once again, is the very core, what is the detriment and what's driving the most divisiveness and the destruction of the rule of law in this country.
Oh, I agree exactly. In high school, I had this affection for communism back in my punker days, right? Yeah, I was like, rah, cool, yeah, you know, collective, proletariat, all that good stuff. And Tiananmen Square happened. So that changed a lot of minds. That changed my mind especially. Sure. So you realize when you crack the authority with the iron rod or the iron fist and what's at stake. And funny, because at that time, Romania went through its revolution, tossed Ceausescu, had him killed, and they became a democratic state because the Kremlin and the Iron Curtain, as we knew it, was beginning to crumble. So when you look back at that and then you see these young kids talking about collectivism, oh, let's have socialize this, socialize that. Okay, some of it works. But when it comes to actually where does the money come from to do it, it comes from tax dollars from you, me, my wife, and everybody else in our great circle we call this country. Your garbage is a socialist idea. It gets picked up by the state and tossed away for you. But that comes through your city taxes and your municipal taxes, right? Socialized medicine, it can be a good thing. As long as people stop going to emergency rooms with head colds, things might be better, right? Yeah. Self-sufficiency there's nothing wrong with self-sufficiency. Nothing wrong with people growing their own food, generating their own power. What's wrong with that? I remember when the green plans came in back in the early 90s, people discussing, oh, we need people to do this and need people to do that, and you know, maybe conserve their own water and conserve more fuel. And when people started doing it, then the government's got to step in and take its percentage. No, if I'm going to spend $5,000 or $6,000 on creating a system that's going to benefit me every year and give me a kickback, well, why should the government have its say in it?
Right.
Like, it has nothing to do with it. They didn't invest the time and effort. They didn't invest the research. They didn't tell me what websites to go to or what encyclopedias to look up on generating your own hydroelectricity. So who are they to tell me that I have to give them a percentage of my labor? They've already taken 42% of my labors this year. They don't need any more.
Yeah. Well, actually,
concerning how our government, well, concerning how much they have spent, you know, our beloved Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. Potato, to use the term loosely,
yeah,
right? Just look at the way he talks to people and the way he speaks in Parliament. The same vicious circle, same rhetoric, same this. And this man is supposed to be an educated official, right? I guess one of his promises came true. Hey, weed's legal, but it's still going to be a government monopoly. Okay. But what's he done for the security of this nation? What has he done for the average Canadian, such as yourself and myself? Now, what great lengths has he gone to secure this nation? What sacrifices has he personally made to get things done?
Yeah, nothing.
Right? He's appointed a cabinet based on parity, not based on actual merit. Right? He's talking humanitarian efforts, yet he's denying fundamental income for a lot of veterans, for a lot of seniors in this country. Right? He's sidestepped every issue when it comes to security. right? He's so worried about diversity, yet he condemns diversity of thought. Where's the basis of diversity right there and then? Diversity of thought, right? The moment you disagree with him, you're labeled as a racist. The moment you disagree with his party, you're labeled a sexist or misogynist. All the big trendy buzzwords that are going around today, right?
Right.
So as a libertarian, you're right, the individual is the minority, right?
Yeah. Well,
I did my service.
Yeah.
No,
Well,
I did it.
Sorry, I just wanted to say before I forget what I was on my mind here, but what you were saying, like you were saying, whether it's socialized health care or any of the other collective endeavors that a government undertakes under the pretense of benevolence, what the kind of pushback I want to hear a lot more people start to use today, because that's the thing you hear a lot of, mostly, especially if you listen to the media, and this is where I get really disturbed, is you hear these predefined political talking points where they're not actually answering the question. They're not actually educating and informing the people at all. Here's what it really should come down to. And if I were sitting on any one of these panels, here's what the kind of information the Canadian would hear from me is, okay, you like healthcare? I do too. I want to protect my grandmother. I want to protect my kids. I want everybody in Canada to have some kind of social safety net. Because yes, we are obviously a wealthy enough nation. There's enough people that make enough money personally that they can spare a few bucks to help their fellow citizen. I would be at the front of the line, stand up to offer my support. But it has to be done under the voluntary means. Under the pretense of government, the way it's done and the way it's been historically is under this pretense that we have this contract and everything these governments, whether it's the Senate or or the House of Commons, that they conjure up in their mind, their political edicts, that they get to superimpose that on us and act as if they're benevolent. Now, if I went and stole from my neighbor, if my kid needed their tooth pulled, let's say, I have a few options. I could make the money myself. I could ask family members, community leaders. I could ask people to help me. That's a voluntary interaction. Or I could go to my neighbor and steal his wallet while he's sleeping and fix my kid's tooth. Now, it might sound great that, hey, look, my kid's tooth got fixed thanks to the funds from my neighbor. The part that I would be leaving out if I didn't mention it, though, would be the fact that I stole the money to get it. So there can no longer be a pretense of benevolence or compassion if you're using theft as a means to an end. Now, today, like I said, someone could have made an argument 30 years ago, well, geez, it's the only way we can do these things. Listen, today with blockchain technology and smart contracts where we can all hold each other to account, you can't manipulate it. It's all AES encryption, 256-bit. This stuff is, like I say, it's foolproof. So you could have all these contracts and no government involved, just market forces. And the beautiful thing about market, and this is another thing that people need to start talking about, market is just us, folks. Market just means us. And the market means that we can hold each other to account. But you put that, instead of the market handling anything to do with economics, you put that in the hands of central planners, there's no accountability, and we all know it, no matter if you're from the right or the left. You have grievances from both sides of the political aisle, whether it's economic or social, where the government is imposing their ideas and their mandates on the people. Well, listen, the market can provide for, if you like not involving yourself into socialized healthcare, we should have a private healthcare system too. So if you're one of those people that you don't want to contribute to the public healthcare system, you don't have to. But that means you don't get access to it either. That means you're going to have to pony up out of your pocket if you need health services. But that's fine. You've made that choice. You live with those choices. That's what freedom is all about. But this one-size-fits-all approach where the government takes our money continuously, like you're saying, upwards of 40, 50, and depending on how wealthy you are in Canada, it could be much in excess of half of your income. Well, how do you know that that's actually going where it should be going? There's no trail. There's no paper trail where they send you. The government doesn't send you a report every year, say, oh, here's where your money, here's how much we took from you, and here's where it all went. No, there's no line by line. Whereas if you were dealing with a market-oriented company or business or organization, there would be ways to hold them to account. So we have to get, at least this is the part, like I say, I'm not trying to be one of these people. Now, ultimately, at some point in time in the future, we're not going to need even the very concept. Well, that's because these derived concepts, government, we're not going to need that. But I get it. Listen, people still believe in the Easter Bunny or Santa Claus, although they call it government today. But hey, I know not everyone's going to wake up to the fact that we should be doing things voluntarily. So I don't expect it's going to go away anytime soon. But what we should be doing is what we're doing here today is at least talk about this stuff, because there's a lot of people in Canada. Now, fortunately, people that know me, they're not as ignorant, but I go out and talk to Canadians, and it's like trying to tell like some of the religious people, and I love them. Like I say, I got lots of my family, but I've tried to tell religious people, hey, the earth might not necessarily be 6,000 years old, might be a little older, might have a little evidence there, but It's the same with talking to people that I call statists that have that indoctrinated belief that comes through our education system, reinforced by people in the community that have been taught through the same thing, is they all believe this foolishness without actually questioning it. And they will never question it until people like me, people like you, until people are willing to stand up and start bringing these conversations to light. Now, I don't care if people want to argue, bicker, come to some agreement or determination of how big government could be or smaller, but at the very least, we should be having the conversation so that people can at least make informed decisions. Because right now what people are making are decisions based on lies and mysticism.
Well, lies and convenience too, right?
Right.
It's like when I voted. Okay, I'm not going to say who I voted for. Let's just say the candidate that I voted for didn't get in. Anyhow, based on the information that I have, okay, I've always prided myself, as we as Canadians have always elected the official based on what we got upstairs. Okay?
Right.
I think the last federal election, based on what you've said on the staticism and everything, was based on charm and looks and promises of a new day. Sunny ways, quote unquote, right?
Yeah.
Sunny ways for whom? Right? Every political party has had its affiliation with its favorites over the years. Mm-hmm. You could look at Maroney and what he did back in the 80s. He favored big business, sure. The free trade agreement took a lot of Canadian business and put it south. Mm-hmm. Okay? But we recovered, fine. In the 90s, Jean Chrétien, what did he do? Sure, our dollar got stronger. The sponsorship scandal in Quebec. Favorites, right? Mm-hmm. I love Quebec. C'est une belle province. I love Quebec. I love everything about this country. I've worked with a lot of Quebecers in the military. I've worked with all walks of life in the military. So I'm not divided when it comes to what province you're from. I find that we have a federal government that's dividing all Canadians in regards to the oil sands, Energy East, right? Our own taxes, our military spending. I recently just read, I don't have the quote for you, but recently just read, there was a gag order from Harjit Singh, our defense minister, right, on people talking about the so-called new F-18 purchases, basically 30-year-old Australian jets compared to our 35-year-old Canadian jets. Right. Basically, it's a glorified exchange when you think about it, but it's still costing, I think, what was it, $6 billion, $7 billion to procure these? Right. So it makes you think, but now there's a gag order within that little circle for people not to talk about it. And I'm just like, okay, well, it's obviously not a national security thing. They just don't want to take responsibility for their actions. Basically, that's my assumption. Yeah. They don't want to take responsibility for the decisions they have made in defense of this country. Okay. And that's where I'm constantly remind myself about the Libertarian platform. We're having a robust military staying within our country, looking after Canadians. And only in emergency, if we have to deploy our troops someplace, then we do it. In an emergency. Right. Not for the sake of the UN or for the sake of, some nation needs a hand. Okay, we can send some aid, what have you. But when it comes to actually getting off our asses and fighting for something, no.
Yeah. Actually, let me just, now that you brought that up, because that's another area where I've heard people very much confuse a libertarian position. Let me just say right now, as a libertarian, the whole concept of open borders, listen, that's a utopian, that's when you're delving into the philosophical aspects of what freedom entails, right? Is where, private property rights, and what it is people are trying to adapt, just like when the Enlightenment era in the, the 1800, people were trying to adapt and learn all based on the information we have. So, some people are basically running the scenarios through their mind, and they do say things that I think sounds quite silly. But in all honesty, as a libertarian, what I want is I have to live in a geographical area in this world. And my geographical area right now currently is called Canada. I'm not looking to unwind or open up borders, and any libertarian that would suggest that we should is basically someone that's not even thinking critically in any way, because we actually have what's called, like you're saying, like a welfare state, a socialist redistributive state. So if you have a constant influx of people that can just pour into your country, well, that's just like if you had your house. You can afford to pay to raise your kids because you've made sure that you accounted for, how much it's going to cost to feed and clothe them and house them. But if all of a sudden somebody opens your front door and starts letting, 30, 40 people into your house, well, all of a sudden everything has changed, and now you are no longer dealing with an actual a unit, whether it's economic in regards to the family or in country as the regards of the pretense of that once again, social contract. But at least in the country of Canada, at least if we're all based on the same rules, which we're not at this point in time, like you say, it's just picking winners or losers depending on the political party that comes to power. But if we get back to the very fundamentals of what freedom actually means and what even Canada in its very foundation and historical English common law entails, because like I said, this has been built up over hundreds of years. This isn't something that had to be top down from government. This is beautiful minds over hundreds of years that have come to the realization that individual rights and sovereignty are the most important fundamental aspects, even within inside a state-like environment. So in Canada, yes, it's Canada would be considered a state and is a collective, but it's okay to function in a collective. I like to play sports. I like to, be on teams. I don't. The problem is if you impose the team to be higher than me, that just makes me a sacrificial lamb to that team. Then I don't have any genuine rights or freedoms. No, I have to be a respected member within that group, within that community, within that state. And if you could do that, then people won't be like, what causes people to go further and further away from statism, even people like myself, is the fact that this whole experiment has been completely upended to the point where else do you have to go? I personally, I prefer, like you say, I like a federalized nation such as Canada, where you have individual provinces, just like in the US, with states' rights being supreme, is that gives you competition within your big compact, your family compact. So if you want to live in a place that has different particular preferences, you go to the west coast or the left coast, as they call it, or in the central part of Canada, like in Alberta, where you prefer more conservative. It allows for competition, but the thing is, it should all be done with real competitive modeling involved, actual market fundamentals that get to be the drivers instead of top-down authoritarian governments, because that's, once again, you're not representative of the people if you're imposing it on them. No, to give people their freedoms is to allow them their freedom to associate and align with wherever they want to be. But the respect of the individual should be held as a priority no matter where you live on any side of this country. So whether it's BC or all the way to Newfoundland. If you respect the individual, then a person can live and reside in any part of this entire country. And even though they might not align politically or in some social economic ideological preference with everyone around them, if you respect the individual, then you can help each other. And like you, I have nothing against French people. I have nothing against race and all that. To me, that's all superficial. It's what's in your mind that matters. I don't care. And like people always try to, especially the white nationals, the one thing I can't stand about the white nationals is when you're just as bad as your opponents, your political opponents, when you're trying to make everything about race or skin color. Because let me just say, as a white Canadian, I've probably been screwed over more times in my life by fellow white people. So it's not about skin color. It should never be about skin color. It should never be about the pretense of any supremacy. It's just we should be homogenous as far as at least our fundamental principles. That's what makes Canada Canada. That's what makes the US US. That's what makes North Korea North Korea, is sticking to the core values and principles. And Canada is supposed to be a country built and established on, not living under pure monarchies. Hey, John.
Hello again, sir.
What happened?
Yep. I just moved it over so I could sit, properly without leaning over and crunching. And I guess, I don't know.
Oh,
maybe my thumb slided over something here.
Oh,
so
yeah, no,
I'm working on a relatively new phone here. So
no, that's cool. I just want to make sure we still had good internet connection. Anyways, John, enough with what I got to say. I want to throw the conversation back in your court here, because after all, you're the one that is being interviewed. But I just want you to touch down on some of the other topics that we might not have discussed already. So feminism, obviously, identity politics. Those would be two of the topics I think we haven't quite covered yet. So if you want to run with that.
Sure. My take on the identity politics. Okay. Historically, when settlers first came to North America, there was quite a bit of racial divide. I understand that. But you and I and everybody else are not responsible for what happened back in the 1860s or 1840s or the 1790s or the 1690s, right?
Exactly.
It's a dark chapter in our history. I understand that. But I also look at good parts of our history, like the Upper Canada Rebellion, where you had farmers and local marketeers and local people rising against the family compact, saying, screw you and your monopoly, we're not taking it anymore. I also look at the fact that we've had Canadians contribute to World War I. even though wars on that scale were basically money-making schemes, we still had young men and women who volunteered their time to go and fight for what we thought was the good fight. And because of World War I, Canada became a nation. We didn't have to have a bloody revolution to accept independence from the Majesty at that time. We didn't need constant petitions and boycotts. Canadian men earned it with their blood. They be rich. So that's a part of history that I'll wave the flag about too.
Yep.
I'm not proud of residential schooling. I think that idea is abhorrent, and I think it's ridiculous, and it's just quite nasty, really. That takes the whole assimilation process to a degree I would never want to see ever in my lifetime or my nieces and nephews' lifetime. What a disgusting display of power that was. Mm. But I'm not going to be made guilty for it either because of the color of my skin.
Exactly.
If a young man is growing up right now and he is confused about who he is, then allow himself to explore said parameters, but don't indoctrinate him. If he can't decide if he wants to be a male or female, well, then let him go his own way and try to figure it out. But don't try to tell me that the sun is the moon and the moon is the sun in the process.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I sure
do.
There
are two genders. There's not 72 genders or 368 genders. There are two, right? You have salt water and you have fresh water. You can use both. I wouldn't recommend drinking the salt water because, well, when you get the shits and then you get sick and then you die.
Yeah.
Fresh water, well, in some cases you have to boil it, but, you know, make a long story short, quit screwing with kids' minds. Let them decide. I don't care if Bob and Steve get married and have a good time. Knock yourselves out, Bob and Steve. I don't care if Jude and Edna get married and have a good time. Knock yourselves out, right? Just as long as you're not affecting anyone's liberty and telling other people what to think and what to do, okay? I fought for gay rights in my teenage years. I grew up with guys that turned out gay. I grew up with girls that turned out gay. They have every right to liberty and longevity as much as you and I do.
Agreed.
Right? But don't tell little Bobby, because he plays with the doll, that he's going to turn into Elizabeth because of it. Right. I played with dolls. I had G.I. Joes. I had a little doll when I was 3 years old. My mother told me about before she died about 2 years ago. It was called Billy Beans. She still had it someplace. You know, I was 3 years old playing with a little doll, but then I was also playing outside. You know, that didn't screw with my gender identity, right? Yeah. Let kids be kids. That's the thing. And if they grow up to be something different, fine. They have to find their own way. They have to find their pathway to do it. And I don't think the state has anything to do with it, other than showing them how to read, how to write, how to understand things. We're missing some certain resilience here when it comes to people growing up. Which brings me to my next point about this whole third wave feminism. My mother was a feminist. She was a strong woman. We had disagreements, granted. Okay, what kid doesn't have a disagreement with their parent? But she wasn't a flag waving, let's hate men and let's find misogyny in every corner of the world. Okay, not every man drags his knuckles and expects the woman to make him a sandwich.
Right.
I don't. I make my wife sandwiches. I've done it. I don't mind. She works, I work. We get along, we get together and do what we can. Find the common ground. It's called maturity. Okay? When I look at what's going on these campuses right now with kids, when I left the military, I had the option, you know, based on my educational background, based on what I can do, I can go to certain schools and try this or try that. When I look at certain campuses out here in the West, I'm appalled in how they treat other students based on opinion or based on thought or based on how you dress or based on the color of your skin. It's disgusting. Here, you and I were taught, don't be racist, don't be this, judge people for who they are. To quote Martin Luther King, judging a person based on their character, not the color of their skin. That's the way I was raised. I judge people on their actions, right? When you get kids sitting there waving the Antifa flag and putting masks on and throwing pipes and rocks at people who have a different opinion towards abortion or immigration, that's not progress. That's not, you know, being liberal. That's being a suck. You know? It's being a little baby.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And you know, by having conversation with people like you, it's a constant reminder that if you take yourself out of the stuff that you're inundated with daily from those in politics or the media, and you just talk. This is why I like to have these conversations. Just talk with other Canadians, such as this gentleman. You would automatically, most people would place someone like you being a military guy, and you're just this ultra social conservative, and you just like, you know, big top down authoritarian government as far as like, you know, law and order. But this is a man, as you're hearing, this is a Canadian that obviously cares and is compassionate towards all Canadians, regardless of their sex, their race, you know. And once again, I too, I love my wife. I love my grandmother. My grandmother is one of the greatest influence I've ever had in my life, actually, especially when my mom and dad went through their divorce. She was always there for me. So I like a good, strong woman. My wife, she's a strong lady, let me tell you. But that's the thing. It's her independence. It's that freedom. And not seeing me as her oppressor, but seeing me as someone that as and not equal as far as she knows that I have strength and she has strengths, but we're equal as far as in our relationship. We're, you know, I don't dominate her, she don't dominate me. We're going to have obviously varying opinions. We're two different people and we're two different sexes, but we respect each other. And once again, it all comes back to even then your personal relationship. In your personal relationship, in your community, in your country, it all comes down to just respecting the individual for who they are, and stop trying to throw everyone into these collective box where you're literally probably these collectives. You're throwing out some of the best people in this country by throwing them under the bus from other people. Like, yeah, sure, there are some white nationalists maybe in this country that are really all about just, you know, that kind of hatred, vitriol, but they're not a representative of a typical Canadian. If you live in this country, you know damn well that's not the truth. Most of the time, a Canadian will bend over backwards. I don't know how many times, whether when I'm out going to the market or somewhere, where people are like, "Oh, sorry," or "Here, you go ahead first," or "You do." You know damn well, Canadians, we bend over backwards to be respectful to each other. And that's really what we have to do, and bring that outside of just our private sphere, like John's and mine. We got to bring that into the public sphere. That's why people like us have to, you know, get our voices out there. So it's not that constant narrative where if you just listen to the media, you're sitting home miserable, popping pills, probably drunk out of your mind because you think the whole world is collapsing down around you and that everyone hates everyone. That's not the truth. The media wants you to believe that because division is always been the method that authoritarians have used. Divide and conquer. It's an age-old tactic that has always worked, and they're going to always double down on it, especially when they feel threatened. But just like John, I'm willing to stand up, and I've been doing it for a while, and John, I'm seeing he's out there constantly. So it's our turn, folks. We got to step up the plate because these fuckers have had too much voice for too long without any pushback. But in the age of information, that no longer has to be the case.
Well, I agree. Let's get the word out there now. Yeah. Which brings me to the next point. I do a little video on YouTube myself. I haven't done anything recent lately, but I might use your platform, if that's okay, to plug my
for sure, go for it.
Platform. Yeah, you can reach me at Krusty Canuck on YouTube. Capital C for Krusty and capital C for Canuck.
Awesome.
Right? There's no facial hair in my videos, so I'm working on something now, but I've been working my actual job that pays my mortgage for the past couple of months now. So, but you can find me there. Please contribute it if you'd like to. I would appreciate if you could.
Yeah, I'll put a link to it right in. I'll find it myself. And actually, I'm glad you tell me this because I'll start following you. I didn't know that myself, but I'll follow you for sure. And I'll place a link to it in the description of this video.
That'd be great. It's just some satire I use. It's basically just recorded through my computer. I don't have any fancy equipment or anything yet, but it's, you know, I'm working on it. But some satire voices, and, you know, we make fun of our government. So that's what we do.
Excellent, John. Well, I know you got to go because you have other commitments that you have to get to. But I want to say once again, thank you very much. And thank you for your service. Thank you for being an amazing Canadian who has the audacity and willingness to stand up because, you know, you will help a lot of people because obviously there's people not just in your community, but people that you've known in the past. And they will know that you're obviously someone that cares and it'll mean something to them instead of just some puppet on the television that's got political talking points. People like to hear from other real Canadians and what they stand for because it emboldens them. Because I've noticed that myself. By me being bold myself, I've helped embolden other people because they recognize that, well, if this guy, because I'm telling you, I wasn't very comfortable when I started doing this. I never wanted to have any spotlight put on me, but I realize I have kids and I know they'll have kids and I have family members. The future of this country is just too important for us not to take the advantage of this information age that we have at our disposal. Like I said, that's like back in the day when the Gutenberg press come to exist. Of course you take advantage of anything you have to push and stand up for freedom and help educate and inform the people.
Oh, exactly. And the information has to be out there.
Yeah.
Right? It has to be out there, regardless if the MSM does it or if we do it.
Right. Well, I mean, I'd be more than happy to allow them to take over if they would once do it, but that's not what's happening. So I guess we have to step up the plate in the void, right? And fill that void, I should say. Anyways, John, I'm going to let you go because I know you got things to do, man. But once again, I very much appreciate you taking the time to have this interview, and maybe we'll talk again soon sometime.
Okay, not a problem. Anytime. Liberty now.
Have a good one.
All right. Cheers.
Take it. Well, that was a great conversation. John is a great upstanding Canadian who, like I said, he's out there standing up for freedom too. And once again, it doesn't matter where you reside historically on the political aisle or what your particular preference or opinion might be in regards to particular subjects or topics. The most important thing is that we all stand up for individual rights and freedom and respect each other. If we can at least do that, then the sky's the limit going forward. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.